I'm Randall Mercer, 58 years old, living in Asheville, North Carolina. I've spent 30 years as a construction foreman. My wife, Denise, 56, works as a hospital administrator. We raised 2 daughters who now live in different states, and lately our house had become quieter than either of us expected. People talk about the empty nest like it's some peaceful reward. Sometimes it feels more like standing in a church after everyone leaves. Familiar. Comfortable. A little too quiet. The first strange thing happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Denise was visiting her sister, and I was cleaning out a drawer in our home office. Nothing exciting. Old warranties. Tax papers. Instruction manuals nobody ever reads. Then I found an old notebook. Inside were several passwords written in Denise's handwriting. Most were outdated. But one caught my attention. It was linked to an email account I didn't recognize. Now before anyone starts sharpening pitchforks, I wasn't snooping. I honestly assumed it was an abandoned account from years ago. We had always shared financial information and major accounts. Curiosity got the better of me. I logged in. The account was active. Very active. There were recent messages from the past week. My stomach tightened. Not because of another man. Honestly, that wasn't my first thought. What bothered me was secrecy. A marriage survives many things. Hidden compartments rarely help. I started reading. Most messages were ordinary. Medical newsletters. Retirement articles. Community events. Then I found something different. A long exchange with someone named Patricia. The subject line read, "Please don't tell Randall yet." I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Men, what would you have done? I kept reading. The messages were frustratingly vague. Patricia asked if Denise was ready. Denise replied she was still gathering everything. Another message mentioned timing. Another mentioned the girls. Nothing else made sense. No explanations. No details. Just enough information to make a husband's imagination work overtime. I closed the laptop. Then reopened it 5 minutes later. That's how suspicion works. You tell yourself you're being rational while doing something completely irrational. The next morning I watched Denise carefully over breakfast. She seemed normal. Maybe too normal. She talked about grocery shopping and her upcoming meeting at the hospital. Meanwhile I felt like I was sitting across from a witness who hadn't been questioned yet. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I've learned that accusations without facts usually create more smoke than light. That evening another surprise arrived. A letter was delivered to our mailbox. It was addressed to Denise. The return address belonged to a financial planning office in Charlotte. And when Denise saw the envelope, her face changed for half a second. Just half a second. But after 34 years of marriage, half a second can tell you a lot. She slipped the envelope into her purse without opening it. That's when I stopped dismissing my concerns. The forgotten email account was one thing. The secret messages were another. The financial letter made 3 coincidences in a row. And 3 coincidences deserve attention. I thought I was finally beginning to understand what was happening. I was wrong. The discovery I made 2 days later raised a far bigger question. I spent the next 2 days doing something many husbands claim they would never do. I paid attention. Not obsessively. Not like a detective in a television drama. I simply watched for patterns. Patterns tell stories. Denise had always been predictable in the best possible way. She liked routines. Same coffee mug. Same morning walk. Same favorite chair in the living room. Suddenly there were small changes. She took phone calls outside. She locked her laptop when she stepped away. She made 2 trips to Charlotte within 3 weeks and described both as errands. That word bothered me. Nobody drives 2 hours each way for errands. Saturday afternoon I sat at the kitchen table and started reconstructing a timeline. The forgotten email account had been active for nearly 3 years. The messages with Patricia went back almost 18 months. The financial planning office appeared repeatedly. And then I noticed something else. The timing matched a difficult period in our lives. 3 years earlier, shortly after our youngest daughter moved away, Denise had become quieter. Not unhappy. Just distant. At the time I blamed normal life changes. Now I wasn't so sure. That evening our older daughter, Claire, called from Ohio. During the conversation she casually asked how Denise was doing. The question itself wasn't strange. Her tone was too careful. Too measured. When I mentioned that Denise seemed busy lately, Claire hesitated. Just for a second. Then she changed the subject. A small thing. But small things were piling up. The next morning I drove to a local diner with my friend Wesley, a retired insurance agent I'd known for 20 years. I didn't reveal everything. I simply asked a question. How often do secrets turn out worse than they look? Wesley laughed. About half the time. Helpful. The other half, he said, stirring his coffee, turn out completely different from what people imagined. That answer stayed with me. Still, I needed facts. Not theories. Monday evening Denise left for what she called a planning committee meeting. While organizing paperwork for tax season, I reviewed our household financial records. Nothing illegal. Nothing hidden. Just documents we both normally accessed. That's when I found a transfer. Then another. Then another. Small amounts. Spread over years. Never large enough to draw attention. But together they added up to more than $60,000. I leaned back in my chair. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. That happens when suspicion becomes evidence. Anger would have been easier. Instead I felt disappointed. 34 years of marriage should not require secret accounts and hidden transfers. An hour later Denise came home. She kissed my cheek. Asked how my day went. Smiled like everything was normal. And for the first time in our marriage, I knew something significant about her life that she didn't know I knew. That feeling sat between us through dinner. Silent. Heavy. Then, just before bed, her phone buzzed on the counter. A preview notification appeared before the screen locked. One sentence. From Patricia. Have you decided whether Randall should know before Friday? I stared at the screen. Friday was only 4 days away. And whatever was coming, it clearly involved me. I thought I was finally close to the truth. But the name I uncovered the following morning changed the entire direction of my investigation. Tuesday morning I made a decision. No accusations. No dramatic confrontations. Just facts. After 34 years of marriage, Denise deserved that much. And frankly, so did I. While she was at work, I returned to the forgotten email account. I searched every message connected to Patricia. Most of them were frustratingly vague. References to meetings. Deadlines. Documents. Conversations that seemed intentionally incomplete. Then I found an attachment. It was an old scanned photograph. At first I thought it had been attached by mistake. The picture showed Denise standing beside an elderly man outside a small house. The date stamp was from nearly 20 years ago. The problem was simple. I had never seen the man before. Not once. And after 3 decades of marriage, there shouldn't have been many people from Denise's life that were complete strangers to me. I checked the email thread. Patricia had written. You know why he never stopped worrying about her? Denise replied. I know. That's why I have to finish this. Finish what? The mystery was no longer pointing toward an affair. It was pointing somewhere else. Something older. Something buried. That afternoon I called our younger daughter, Bethany. Not to interrogate her. Just to talk. For most of the conversation we discussed ordinary things. Work. Weather. Family. Then I casually mentioned Patricia. Silence. A long silence. Bethany. She cleared her throat. Oh. Mom still talks to Patricia? Still. That single word landed like a hammer. Still meant history. Still meant this wasn't recent. Still meant people around me knew things I didn't. Who is she? I asked. Bethany hesitated. I think Mom should explain that herself. That answer told me more than she realized. When family members start protecting information, there is usually a reason. By Wednesday evening I had built a rough timeline. The email account. Patricia. The financial transfers. The trips to Charlotte. The mysterious photograph. All of it stretched back years. Not months. Years. Which raised an uncomfortable question. If Denise had hidden this for so long, was she protecting herself? Or someone else? That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I walked downstairs for water. A light was glowing beneath the office door. Denise was inside. Alone. Crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly staring at paperwork spread across the desk. For a moment I almost walked in. Almost. Instead I stepped back into the darkness. Because what I saw next stopped me cold. She opened a folder. Inside were legal documents. Property records. Financial statements. And a handwritten letter. At the top of the page was the same unfamiliar name from the photograph. The elderly man. But now I could finally read it. Harold Whitaker. Denise stared at the letter for several seconds before placing her hand over her mouth. Then she whispered 5 words. 5 words I was never supposed to hear. I should have told him. At that moment, I knew 2 things. First, Denise was carrying something far heavier than simple dishonesty. Second, Friday wasn't a deadline. It was a reckoning. And less than 12 hours later, I discovered exactly who Harold Whitaker was. Thursday morning began with a phone call. Not from Denise. From Patricia. I recognized the number from the email records. For several seconds I simply stared at my phone. Then I answered. Patricia sounded older than I expected. Calm. Careful. Randall, she said, I think we need to talk. That was not how I imagined this mystery unfolding. I agreed to meet her that afternoon at a small cafe on the edge of Asheville. When I arrived, she looked nervous. Not guilty. Nervous. There's a difference. She folded her hands and got straight to the point. You already know about the email account. I didn't deny it. You should have been told years ago, she said quietly. Then she slid a folder across the table. Inside was the answer I'd been chasing. Harold Whitaker wasn't a former boyfriend. He wasn't a secret husband. He wasn't some hidden partner in a financial scheme. He was Denise's uncle. The man who had helped raise her after her father died. A man she rarely discussed because the loss still hurt. I sat back. Part of the puzzle clicked into place. But not all of it. What does that have to do with $60,000? I asked. Patricia lowered her eyes. Everything. The story unfolded piece by piece. 20 years earlier Harold had purchased a small property outside Charlotte. Nothing valuable at the time. After his death, ownership became tangled in legal issues, taxes, and distant relatives. Most family members walked away. Denise didn't. For years she quietly handled paperwork, maintenance costs, and legal fees. The transfers I discovered had funded that effort. Not luxury. Not betrayal. Responsibility. Yet one question remained. Why hide it from me? Patricia sighed. Because she was afraid. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because fear had become the invisible third person in our marriage. Afraid I'd be angry. Afraid I'd see the money as wasted. Afraid I'd think she was clinging to the past. Afraid the whole situation would become another burden on our family. Fear had built a wall one brick at a time. Then Patricia handed me the final document. A completed sale agreement. The property had recently sold. For far more than anyone expected. The proceeds were substantial. Very substantial. Enough to change retirement plans. Enough to affect our daughters and future grandchildren. Enough to explain Friday. I drove home with the folder beside me. That evening Denise was waiting at the kitchen table. The legal papers were already there. The letter from Harold was there too. And when she looked up at me, she immediately knew. No more hiding. No more delays. No more carefully edited explanations. For the first time in weeks, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't angry. It was exhausted. Finally Denise's eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic tears. The kind that come when someone has carried the same weight for too long. Then she asked a question that cut deeper than any secret. After everything I've hidden, do you still trust the man you thought I married? I had my answer ready. But before I gave it, Denise revealed the one truth she had feared telling me more than anything else. Denise sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. For a moment neither of us spoke. 34 years of marriage sat between us. Good years. Hard years. Years that deserved honesty. Finally she took a breath. The thing I was most afraid to tell you wasn't about the money. I listened. It was about me. Those words carried more weight than any financial document. Denise looked down at Harold's letter. When the girls left home, I stopped recognizing myself. There it was. Not betrayal. Not greed. Not another man. Identity. The quiet crisis nobody talks about. She explained how the empty house affected her more deeply than she ever admitted. For decades she had been a mother, a wife, a caregiver, a problem solver. Then suddenly the daily demands disappeared. The silence arrived. And she began wondering who she was without everyone needing her. The work involving Harold's property became more than a responsibility. It became purpose. A mission. Something she could fix. Something that made her feel useful again. But the longer I kept it from you, she said, the harder it became to tell the truth. That part one understood. Secrets grow in darkness. Not because they're evil. Because they're neglected. I nodded toward the folder. You should have trusted me. I know. You made that decision for both of us. I know. No excuses. No deflection. Just accountability. That mattered. Then Denise told me something else. The proceeds from the property sale had never been intended for her. Or for us. Harold's final wish had been simple. Help the family. The money was earmarked for our daughters, future grandchildren, education funds, emergencies, and family needs long after we were gone. She had spent years protecting that dream. Unfortunately, she had protected it from the one person who should have been standing beside her. Me. I reached across the table and took her hand. Not because the secrecy was acceptable. Because the truth finally was. Denise, I said, I'm disappointed you hid this. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But I'm not disappointed in the woman sitting across from me. She cried harder after that. Sometimes forgiveness isn't weakness. Sometimes it's recognizing the difference between a mistake and a character flaw. For the next several months we rebuilt trust deliberately. We created complete financial transparency. Every account. Every document. Every decision. No exceptions. We also met with a counselor. Not because our marriage was broken. Because strong marriages deserve maintenance too. Most importantly, we started talking again. Really talking. About aging. Retirement. Fear. Purpose. The things people often avoid until they become problems. A year later we established a family trust honoring Harold's wishes. Both daughters participated. Future grandchildren would benefit. The project became something that belonged to all of us. And in a strange way, the secret that nearly damaged our marriage ended up strengthening our family. Today, when I look back, I don't remember the hidden email account first. I remember the lesson. Pride says, handle it alone. Wisdom says, trust the people who love you. Denise made a foolish mistake. I could have made one too by assuming the worst. Instead, we chose honesty. Then effort. Then forgiveness. That's how a marriage survives. Not by avoiding storms. By facing them together. What happens when a husband's worst suspicions lead not to betrayal, but to a painful truth hidden behind years of silence? Sometimes the greatest threat to a marriage isn't deception itself, it's fear, and the wisdom required to confront it.